go ahead and get started. Can you just tell the guests if they're going to come in, if not, shut those doors.
Like if you're going to be here, if not, be somewhere else.
I like you, Carrie.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Everybody's shuffling in now. So here's how this is going to go. We're going to do a 45-minute Q&A. This is for youth leaders. We have about 100 people Zooming right now. We've got some live people. So we're going to run for 45 minutes, and then we'll take a little 15-minute break, and then we'll come back on for the fireside. So anyone that's staying for the fireside, don't be worried if you don't see us in 45 minutes. But welcome. My name is Carrie Stefani. This is Charlie Bird and Ben Schilaty. And we're going to start with an opening prayer that's going to be given by Holly Barber. And
Holly, you're great at prayers.
Okay, just come on up. And you'll have to talk in his mic.
Wow, I don't think we're friends anymore, Carrie. Heavenly Father, we're so grateful to be in the company of each other and in thy company too, with the spirit that is here. We're grateful for the speakers that have traveled to come here. We're grateful for Carrie and Gabe and for all the efforts that they put in for this really important purpose. We love thee, Heavenly Father, and we love thy children, and we want to walk in Jesus' footsteps. We want to be givers of love in all aspects of life, and that is one reason why we're here, and we pray to learn and be able to change and make things better. And we ask you to bless us in those efforts too. And we're grateful for all the blessings that we receive and enjoy each day. We love thee, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Holly, now you'll be bearing your testimony.
And I'm going to just turn the time over to them.
Great. Well, we're so thrilled to have everybody here. So we don't want to double dip too much and make this the same thing that's going to happen in 45 minutes. So we just kind of want to open up to what are your questions? What is happening in your wards, in your lives, in your families? What can we do you guys are all leaders here, many of you youth leaders, and what are your questions and concerns? What can we do to help you guys?
And open it up to the Zoom.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Zoom, you type in your questions, you raise your hand. We're good to go.
So I'll ask this question.
Yeah.
If you were to give and just repeat my question because they can't hear me.
Oh, this is not my first rodeo.
If you were to give a youth leader 5 quick tips, here are 5 quick tips for leading LGBTQ youth and teaching your youth inclusion, what would you say?
Okay, so Sister Stefani asked, what are 5 tips that we could give to youth leaders on how to create safe, inclusive spaces? Charlie, tip number 1.
Yeah, so the first thing I thought of when you said that was just kind of treating every interaction at church as if there is an LGBTQ or same-sex attracted person in the room. Statistically, there probably is. And I know that growing up for me, I was actually very good at hiding my orientation. And I went to a lot of great lengths to make sure that nobody knew that I was gay. I was going on a lot of dates, and I leaned into my ranch roots, and so because of that, everyone assumed that in those spaces that everybody was straight, kind of fit the mold, and I was treated as such. And also because of that, I heard a lot of really hurtful and damaging things that were really hard for me in that position, so vulnerable and so paranoid, worried about who I was, how I would fit, if people would accept me or not. And then some of the things I heard were really devastating and really pushed me further into a dark place. So even if you don't know if somebody in the room is experiencing same-sex attraction or identifies as LGBTQ, you don't really know until they come out. And most of the time at those young ages, the identity is kept very guarded, very secret. So if you can speak as if somebody might be, then it can really weed out a lot of those cultural undercurrents that are going to be really damaging down the road.
Thank you. Yeah. And tip number 2 that I will say would be that vulnerability breeds vulnerability. So if you are open and sharing the realities of your life, the youth are going to be more willing to share what's going on in their lives as well. So I would say practice vulnerability with the youth, model what that looks like in like a healthy and safe way. And one way I found to get youth talking as someone who's been a high school, middle school teacher before, I would talk to youth. I'd be like, "What do you think about this?" And they'd just be like, "I don't know." But then if you don't say anything for 10 seconds and just then they start talking, it's like, "So what do you think about this?" Like, "I don't know." Then you wait, and then they tell you. So I would say also just be a little patient with them. I guess that's tip 3. Give them time to respond, because youth, if you give them a lot of silence, will often say more than you'd expect.
Mm-hmm.
That's 2 and 3.
That's 2 and 3. Now I have to think of the 4th one. Kind of along with that, I'm just thinking of like kind of like the youth and the teenagers I know now. There's a lot of like identity development. There's a lot of like, who am I? I want to fit in. I want my friends to be cool. And just a lot of like movement, it seems, with like personality and who am I? How do I fit in the world? And I think across that, for me, looking back, it was always really helpful when people expressed trust in me as I was going through it. Sometimes church can kind of feel like, do this and do this and do this and do this. And it was almost like, if you mess up, everything's ruined. But to me, it felt like a better approach was like, hey, like, I trust you. Like, I know your faith, I've seen your testimony, and I trust you to make the right decisions. And that's really what's going to develop like personal trust in the youth's own agency and their emotional resilience. So I feel like that approach was more helpful with me, just kind of in general, but then especially as relating to orientation.
Yeah. And the 5th thing I would say is, whatever they're interested in, learn about that and be interested in it. Like, if they're, I don't know what the cool thing is. It's not Pokemon anymore, is it?
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh, Pokemon's back. Okay. Like, whatever they're into.
Pokemon never left.
Whatever they're interested in, be into that. I have a nephew who really loves Roblox. And so I was like, tell me everything about Roblox. And then we had a great chat about that. I don't super care about Roblox. He's not watching, so it's okay. But whatever they're into, just be into that and be like sincerely care about it and want to learn about it. And as you do that, the kids are going to be more likely to talk to you and trust you.
Yeah. And I feel like that's just kind of a true principle in general. Today in Elders Quorum, we were talking about ministering and just kind of this idea of meeting someone where they're at. And they used the example of President Nelson. Well, I forgot what it was.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, the ham radio.
The
Thank
ham
you.
radio.
Like he was assigned to home teacher minister to someone who liked ham radio. So we learned a lot about it and kind of developed a connection. And then when someone's in crisis or needs help or looking for guidance or advice, if you can have something in common, it's a lot easier to jump in rather than just kind of like cold call, be like, hi, I'm here to help you. So, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to make that gong in. So Charlie, on the first tip that you gave, let me ask you, can you give a concrete example of that? So how you might speak or act differently if you're assuming that there is someone who's LGBTQ in the group. I mean, I think some obvious things, we don't want to say derogatory things. We don't want to make gay jokes. I mean, those are kind of obvious, but I'm guessing maybe you have insights that go beyond that.
Yeah, so I would actually
restate the question.
So the question was, if for my first tip about treating each church interaction as if there's a same-sex attracted or LGBTQ individual in the room, and if there can be some more concrete examples of that. Honestly, I would say that for a lot of people, it's not so obvious making like overtly like pointed or like identity-based jokes. And a lot of just, and granted, it's been, 10 years or so since I was a youth. But
same for me.
But there's a lot of just like ways people talked and jokes, and that's so gay when there's something that's less than or stupid, and it's just like associating being gay with something lesser or something evil. And then I think, and this is honestly more of when I was in a YSA ward, but there was so much pressure to date and marry, which I agree is important, and families are so quintessential, and I think it's wonderful that there's that aspect of church that allows for relationship building. But it got to the point where I almost didn't want to come to church because I knew if I showed up, it was just like, why aren't you dating? Who are you dating? We want to set you up. We want to set you up. And that puts me in the position where I have to just lie. And it's either come out or lie. And I just felt so uncomfortable. And I think, I wish people would have kind of like picked up on my discomfort there, because I couldn't play that off well. It was always very jarring to me. So just being emotionally intuitive and kind of giving someone space.
Where was the pressure coming from? Was it from the bishopric or just was it just in the culture of the ward?
I think it's both. Yeah, it feels both. And like I said, I understand why that happens. But when you don't fit that mold and you're really concerned about that, like that was a real trigger point for me, because I was thinking, I want a family, but I don't know if I can do it. I'm not sure what my life's going to look like. And then having people just like constantly hit that sore spot was really difficult.
Yeah, and what Charlie's saying is incredibly important. And just to kind of add some more concreteness to it. So when I was 23, I had flown home for Thanksgiving, and I was like sure I was going to come out to my parents. I decided to come out to my parents. So I was home for Thanksgiving. On the way home from the airport, we stopped at my uncle's house. I do not know my uncle well at all. Like my mom's side of the family, we're not close. I hadn't seen him in years. He knew nothing about me. So we're chatting. He's like, blah, blah, blah. You dating any women or any men? And so here he was trying to be inclusive, and that like terrified me. Because then he put this like maybe Ben is gay out into the room, and here this is like this thing that's like weighing on me so much, and that was terrifying. So I think it'd be important to not like put this possibility onto people who might be afraid to admit that. But every situation is different, so I don't want to give tell you too much what to do. But one thing that was really helpful is when people talked about LGBTQ people in just like natural positive ways. Like if there was a lesson at church and the example story was of like a gay person, that meant the world to me, because it showed that there was like this possibility. So not saying, hey Ben, if you're gay, it's okay, like that would have terrified me. But like there's a gay person and they're okay. That was something that was helpful for me.
That's good.
So it's basically not making it personal to you, but just as a generalized comment.
Yeah, I think that's, I actually have a story.
Say the question.
Oh, she's asking if it's like not making it basically what Ben was saying, not making it personal, but kind of like giving this general, more of a general approach. And I didn't even say the word gay until I was 23. I didn't identify. I was terrified of it. I was trying so hard to not be who I was. And so growing up, just naturally people would be like, are you gay? Because of, I guess, my energy or the way I was interacting, my cake decorating, right? And I was always just like, wow, it's like red alert, there's danger here. And it was interesting, actually, my story involves cake decorating. I worked at a bakery my senior year of high school to save up money for my mission. And one time, there was like this really young salesperson. He was probably he was my age, like 19 or 20. And he came in and he was really handsome. And I was like so scared because I always just got so awkward when that happened. And I like got vibes that he was interested in me. And I was devastated. It was so scary to me. I didn't know how to handle that. And I ran to the back and started organizing the freezer, which is like the worst thing. Nobody wants to organize the freezer. It's so cold in there. And I was
like church today.
Like church today, you're right. And I was like, we're in Florida, shouldn't it be a little hotter? But I was back there for like 30 minutes and I came back out, and the lead cake decorator was this backwoods gal named Lisa. And she smoked and she drove a truck, and she was just very like not what you would think would be like LGBTQ ally. And so I came back and she's was talking to me and thanked me for doing the work. And then she just said, my uncle's gay. And I was like, okay. And she was like, he's my favorite uncle. Some of the family was disappointed in him, but I think he's really brave and I really love him. And I just immediately changed the subject. I didn't want to talk about that. anyway, 6 years down the road, I'm starting to come out to people, and I'm so scared of who's going to accept me and who's not, and which relationship is going to change, or which bridges I might just burn by being myself. And Lisa, my old coworker, is the kind of woman that I would expect to be disgusted by me. But the next time I went home and I walked in the store and I'd come out, I remembered that story, and I was like, oh, I don't have to worry about Lisa. Like, Lisa's got my back. Because she took away the weight of that what if years before I even knew how needed it was. And she did it in that really general way. So it was specific to someone, but it was in a way that I knew that she would love me and wouldn't reject me.
And Charlie and I were both talking about our youth because it was a different time. Like, we couldn't have been open and out. So you might have youth who want to be open out, who aren't scared of their orientation, their gender identity. That's a very different situation. And so I would say the most important thing that people can do, and this isn't just about LGBTQ people, but it's learn stories of diversity. Like learn diverse stories and then share them. You know, learn about what it's like to be an LGBTQ life saint, and then when it comes up organically, share those stories in classes. You know, what's it like to be an immigrant who's a member of the church? Like, and share those stories. You know, what's it like to be a divorced person in the church? You know, share those stories. You know, we should be learning and then sharing, because that's what Zion is. It's a place of people of one heart and one mind. So let's share hearts and minds.
And I think you were talking about being vulnerable and how that breeds vulnerability. I think in a way, if that's demonstrated through diverse backgrounds and respecting different kinds of people and pulling interesting stories in of faith and pioneering, and I think that can really go a long way to signal a sense of safety. And you know, there's a lot of people who feel like they don't conform, and sometimes church feels very checklisty. It feels very like us versus them. It feels like you must look or be this way in order to truly belong. And just think about how many people that can weed out in general. So if our net to gather Israel is really wide, then we're going to make sure that the people who need it are with us.
Maybe you'll talk about this, but how do we recognize, I hate to read the word discrimination, but how do we recognize this in ourselves? I'm just so worried that sometimes I'm one of those people that's not sensitive because I don't know, I don't know my question, but.
This is like the sweetest question.
I don't know how to
No,
recognize it.
her question essentially sounds like, how do I recognize bias in myself if I'm not sure if it's there or not?
Yes.
And I think, like, I'm not worried about you at all. Like, like the fact that that's a thought shows that you care and you're open to learning. And you know, there's so many things I learn and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am an idiot. Like, I had no idea that I was holding on to this belief or this word that's actually kind of like repelling people from me. I had no idea. But it started making me actively seek out information about different experiences or less common experiences. So I think it's a combination of proximity and education. And as you gain proximity to the stories of LGBTQ saints, or just in your community, and are educated and can use any resources you have, whether it's through the church or books or podcasts or individual stories, that can kind of like hone you and make you a more effective like conduit for someone's health and testimony.
Yeah, and that's the troubling thing about ignorance. Like, we don't know when we're ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know what we don't know. And so the way that we combat that is by, you know, being people where we can take feedback from people, like demonstrating that we're welcome to feedback and we're welcome to learning. And I try really hard to just be like aware of my feelings and how I'm experiencing things. So one quick example of me being unintentionally just a little racist. I was a BYU student not too long ago, and I was in the dean of students' office, like it's this big office suite, and one of the associate deans introduced me to this person who was there, and he was wearing, he's a person of color, and he was wearing like a button-up shirt and jeans. And so I thought he was the janitor. And then he's like, oh, Ben, meet so-and-so. This is the dean of students. Like, a super important person at BYU. And I just initially thought like, oh, he must just be the janitor because how he's dressed and how he looks. And I remember like having that thought, and then remembering like other times where I just like assumed that someone wouldn't be in a position of authority or privilege because of how they looked. And so now, as I've been more aware of that, I have, you know, taught myself not to be more open-minded and to not just expect that people who are white are going to be in positions of authority. And so, we just like when those things happen, like if someone's like sharing a story about like a gay person, like, oh, you like feel yourself going like, oh, or like feeling uncomfortable, recognize that discomfort and then ask yourself like, where's that discomfort coming from? And is that a feeling that I want to have? And if we can like really analyze like, when am I feeling discomfort? When am I feeling like yucky? And then kind of take a few steps back, like, okay, like where's this feeling coming from? And that's how we're going to notice our biases.
But follow up on that, sorry, if another adult is showing those kinds of feelings and talking about it and is aversive, how would you say you talk to them? For example, the flyer, my husband's friend saw the flyer for tonight and was like, oh, right, like who would go to this, right?
Yeah.
So offensive. And
Yeah.
then I show up like 2 days later and like, hey honey, I'm going to this. He's like, oh, whoa, why?
Right.
And I'm like, and so he told me what his friend did, and I'm like, so what'd you say? Nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
I hate that.
That's a great question. The question was, what do we do if like another adult is like averse or like showing bias, basically? I think if we go to the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, if your brother offend thee, go between him and thee alone. And these kinds of conversations work the best one-on-one. So we can say, hey, I noticed this thing, and like politely point out something that we noticed, and like giving someone an opportunity to learn and grow, I think is really important. But also just helping people understand. Like I would say something like, I noticed that you saw this flyer and felt uncomfortable. Could you help me understand where you're coming from? And so letting people talk and explain where they're coming from, and then showing that we understand what they're saying. Then we say, well, is it okay if I share my perspective? There's this event. I want to go to this event for X, Y, and Z reasons. And we might not change their mind, but if we have conversations in that way, the person feels heard, they feel understood, and we can share our perspective and give them an opportunity to grow. And I would say something like, well, I'm going to go. Why don't you come with me? Let's sit together. And then we can talk about it after, and then see what happens.
And by doing those things, we're going to help by throwing out the mold that you guys talked about, the cookie cutter that everybody has to fit in.
Yeah.
Because the same way you guys were judged, the expectations, I think, also happened to people who didn't get married
For sure.
straight and who haven't had kids soon enough, right? Their word culture was like, why aren't you married yet? Why aren't you having kids yet? And that person can't have kids
Right.
yet. And I know lots of people who didn't fit the mold. We need to get rid of the mold.
Yeah.
And we need to, I guess, by taking steps like this today and standing up like that.
And the truth is, like, speaking about the mold, there's like 15% of people who actually like fit the mold, and even those 15% feel like they don't fit the mold. And so, everyone at some point feels marginalized and feels left out. Like that's just a normal human experience. And so, this isn't just about LGBTQ people. Like these are principles that can be applied to a lot of things. And a story that I shared on our podcast not too long ago, one of my good friends said something that was like really troubling to me. And I know him well. He's a very close friend, and I knew he didn't mean any malice by it, but it like upset me for days. And so when I saw him again a few days later, I was like trying to figure out like how he was going to have this conversation and like tell him why what he said was upsetting. And then when we were together, I just said, "Hey, I noticed you said this thing. Could you help me understand what you meant?" And he just said, "I am so sorry. That is not what I meant." And then he was able to explain himself, and it was all fine. But I'd stewed about it for days.
He noticed that he did that to you. Okay, so I accidentally did something like that. Is it better for me to recognize my bias and my mistake and just move on and not do it again? Or is it better for me to come to you and apologize and bring up this awkward thing that happened?
I would. So the question is, if you find yourself in a position like that where you've offended someone and you've realized that, should you just move on and make that correction personally, or go back and apologize and kind of like bring that up again? And I would say that's just like let the spirit guide on that, just case by case relationship. I feel like trusting the gut is really important. If it feels necessary to bring up and it feels healing, then that'd be good. But if it feels like it'll make the situation worse or stir up bad feelings, just use your discretion there.
Yeah, just as Charlie was talking, as you're answering this question, I've thought of many examples in my recent history where someone has apologized to me for something that they said or did, and the majority of the time, I don't remember what they're talking about. But the collective weight of those apologies has just like given me a lot of hope. And so if anyone has done something where they feel like they did something wrong, even if the person doesn't remember, like an apology is like such a kind thing. And apologize, like a sincere apology is never the wrong thing to do. And then also, as we were talking, I thought about a recent experience where I wish someone would apologize. And if that person apologized, like that would really be meaningful to me.
Ben, I'm so sorry.
Charlie, I forgive you, and I remember exactly what it was. No, just kidding.
I also want to point out, like, that question again is really beautiful. Your initial question of like, how do I step in if I see this happening? And that's it's a really brave space to take up, because really you're stepping yourself into that hurt, right? That hurt that could be directed towards someone. It's like stepping in to intercept it, and it takes a lot of bravery. It's not comfortable, and in a way, though, I feel like us as members of the church are kind of prepared for that in the way that we've been raised to choose the right and do the right thing. And I'm thinking of President Monson's story about when he's like in the military and they're like this church and this church, and he's the last one standing, and he's like, I'm the Mormon, right? Was the term he used.
It was okay to say that back then.
And so I think even though it's so like it takes so much bravery, it's almost like we have that bravery and that earnest desire to do the right thing within us. And if you can tap into some of that, I have to do that. Sometimes I can be like, oh my gosh, dare to stand alone. All right, so. You had a question back here.
Good, yeah. Sorry, my sister's like texting in questions, so. So our question is, how can we help LGBTQ youth navigate church when it's causing mental health problems?
Yeah. So the question is, how can we help LGBTQ youth at church who are experiencing mental health concerns?
Yeah,
Because of their orientation or gender identity and the culture at church. So the prevailing theory of suicide right now is called the interpersonal theory of suicide. And it says that there are two factors that can lead to feelings of suicidal ideation or like increased feelings of suicidal ideation. And they're thwarted belongingness and perceived burdensomeness. So thwarted belongingness means like trying to belong, wanting to fit in, feeling like you don't. So imagine being a gay person at church, and we talk about marriage and families and children and all these like beautiful things that are important to the gospel and important to the church. And feeling like, well, I can't do that. That's going to lead to feelings of thwarted belongingness. And then also, and the other one is perceived burdensomeness. So feeling like you're a burden. Like, imagine saying like, I'm gay, and then your parents saying, well, you've just wrecked our eternal family, which is something that happened like weeks ago that I heard about. And
it's common. It's very common.
And so what we need to do is the opposite of that. So how can we help youth know like you are a gift, like you are not a burden, you are a gift, and also that you belong here and we claim you. So youth need to know explicitly you are a gift and we claim you. That's what they need to know. And so those are the big principles, and whatever that's going to look like, and your rewards and stakes, I don't quite know, but that's what we do. We let people know you are a gift and you belong here. And the other thing I would add is it's really powerful when someone can feel heard. I am like a happy, healthy person today in a lot of ways because of so many people who have like been so good to me. And one of those people is Kelly Bauer. He was the institute director in Tucson when I was doing my PhD program there. And I came out publicly when I was 30 years old, like a month before I turned 31. And then a year later, I was in a class that he was teaching at the Tucson Institute, and there was 10 of us in the class. It was a class for people over 25, and we were going to talk about LGBTQ stuff one day, and he said, "Hey, would you like take 10 minutes and share your story?" I was like, "Of course." And I knew everyone in the class, like they all knew I was gay already, and it was like this really wonderful experience, like just getting to share my story for 10 minutes in class. And he said, and the thing he asked me to talk about was, how has your orientation taught you about the atonement? Like, what a beautiful thing to ask me to do. And then after that, he said, "Ben, will you give a devotional to the whole institute on a Friday?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And that was the first time I had ever been asked to talk about orientation. And it was such a beautiful experience for me. So let the youth talk about what's going on in their lives. Let them share their real experiences, and that will be a gift for them. And it'll expand the hearts and minds of the other youth as well.
I want to tag on to the concepts of thwarted belongingness and perceived burdensomeness. One of the first things, like when you said like you're a gift and I claim you, like for everyone, like imagine that message if someone were to say like you are a gift and I claim you. That just like it enlivens the heart, it just increases the love in the room and I just feel like that's how God feels about me, that I'm a gift to him and that he claims me. And if we can give that Christ-like, pure love to other people, they're going to be drawn to that goodness and want to stay in holier, safer places. And then with the belongingness, oh, I had a good thought. What was it? And
It'll come back.
it'll come back. It'll come back.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
We have a couple from Zoom that kind of go along with this theme, so just thought I'd bring them up.
Perfect.
One is, how can we be sensitive in lessons when discussing things like temple marriage, forever families, preference for family, etc.? Anything that might leave an LGBTQ youth feeling left out and isolated? And then how do you teach the proclamation of the family while still being sensitive to the LGBTQ?
Yeah. Yes.
Can they hear you? So the question was, how do you teach some of these more sensitive lessons about family and marriage and temple in a way that is like not hurtful to the LGBTQ person? And I think, I don't know, it's going to look different based on the teacher, based on the lesson, based on the individuals in the room. But I think one meaningful thing that Elder Holland did in General Conference a few years ago, he gave this beautiful allegorical talk about the choir and how there's room for everyone in the choir. And within this, he listed types of people who belong in the choir. And they're the kind of people who don't feel like they belong, the single saint or the divorced sister. And he said those with differing sexual orientations. And just by acknowledging me in that simple list, I was like, oh, I'm seeing like I'm part of this. And so if there's ways that we can say, this can be a sensitive topic for some people, but we want to teach these true principles and also understand that there's room for all of us here. And just giving someone a little space to stand, it helps them stand a little taller. And then some of it is just going to be hard, right? Like no matter what aspects of the gospel and this striving for like excellency can be really difficult if you feel like it's not happening in your life. But like pairing emotional resilience with space can help someone deal with that hurt.
When I was in high school, I saw a comedic bumper sticker that said, "Guns don't kill people, I kill people." and this is why I'm
interested where you're going with this.
So the proclamation can be a tool or it can be a weapon. A gun can be a tool or a weapon. The proclamation can be a tool or it can be a weapon. And when it is used as a weapon to hurt or marginalize people, it's being used incorrectly. And so let's look at the principles in the proclamation that are true eternal principles that we can use to build people. I was in a class once in my parents' ward when I was visiting for Christmas a few years ago, and the teacher quoted that line in the proclamation where it says, gender is an essential characteristic of individual premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose. He said, isn't it great that we know that transgender people aren't real? They're making it up. And I raised my hand. And I said, well, let's look at what the proclamation says and what it doesn't say. It says that gender is an essential characteristic, but it doesn't say that transgender people aren't real. And I have a lot of transgender friends, and they look at that sentence, and there are different ways that it makes sense to them, and different ways that it's meaningful for them in their life. And I think that's beautiful that people can look at that. And so so we need to make sure we're looking at what it does say and what it doesn't say. And also, there are such beautiful principles in there, like all human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God, and each of us have a divine nature and destiny. Like, that is beautiful. Like, why wouldn't you want to teach that to somebody? And so, so I would say let's teach truth, and we don't need to shy away from truth. We don't need to shy away from the church's teachings on the family and the eternal nature of families. But we can also focus on those principles that are going to enliven people and build them up and show them, like, I have a divine nature and destiny. I am created in the image of God, and I can do so many amazing things. Let's say, okay, let's figure out what that is. Like, what is your divine nature? What is your identity and purpose? And how are you going to move forward with that in your life? I think that there are a lot of ways we can use a proclamation that's going to be a tool to build people instead of a weapon to hurt people.
That's really beautiful. Thanks, Ben. And I'm also thinking about my relationship with the document. And one thing that was just like so eye-opening and just like helpful to me was realizing, so I was doing that to myself, right? I used to read it in a way that was just like, how is this like showing that I'm wrong? But then I read it through the lens of my own family, right? The family I belong to, my parents. And I read, marriage between a man and woman is ordained of God. And I just had such gratitude for my parents for creating like a beautiful union that allowed me to grow up in a stable home. For a while, they ended up getting a divorce, but that period was just so like so special to me. And I'm reading about, you know, the sanctity of families, and I was like, you know, my eternal family. I was always like, I'm not gonna have an eternal family because you know, like marriage in the temple, a woman, that's not gonna work for me, and it stressed me out. And I was like, no, I'm part of an eternal family. I'm part of my family and God's family. So just kind of like flipping the way I viewed it towards what rang true to me really helped me develop love and sink deeper into those eternal truths about who I am.
And like if I were teaching a youth, thank you, Charlie. I really love what you said, and I would say something very similar, like this experience I had where I just like realized like I'm not gonna have a family. Like I don't fit into this church. I don't have a family. Like no, already have a family. Like I have parents who love me and siblings and nieces and nephews. And if I were to teach a youth who was like I don't like the proclamation because I don't fit in. I don't fit in here. I'd say well we're brothers and sisters and you're my family and I claim you and you're mine forever. Like we're family forever. You know, make sure all the youth know that like they know that we're family.
BFFs.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have another one from online?
Yeah, we do. Church youth dances and same-sex dancing. What is the standard, and how do we help everyone feel welcome and included?
Yeah, that's a great question that I can answer. Maybe with some principles. So I don't know.
The question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The question was, you know, what are the standards for church dances and same-sex dancing? So FSY, For the Strength of Youth, is hosted at BYU, so I know a little bit about what happened there this summer. And they have the For the Strength of Youth had a counselor training. They told all the counselors whatever they want to be addressed by, let's honor that. Like we're just glad that they're there. And so the whole principle was if the youth are here, let's be glad that they're here and let's accommodate whatever we can. As far as same-sex dancing, I was not aware of any rules that were stated there. So I don't know. I don't know what you do in that case. I would say that's something that to counsel with the Stake Youth Council with church leaders here, because I'm not aware of any stated rule. There might be that I'm not aware of, but I would say counsel with the councils and see what feels best.
Book of Mormon distance between all dancers, though.
Our stake same-sex dancing.
Uh-huh.
My daughter just went to dance last night and said, "They're still brutal dancing, breaking the rules." Right? So I guess even if there is a rule, it doesn't matter, right? Like you can still.
I don't want to say if there's a rule, it doesn't matter, but yeah,
Still,
yeah.
still break it. They still are going to stand up for what I don't know. But they believe.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a tough issue. I think a lot of times when there's like a policy question, it's best to consult like the handbooks and the policy, and then like work with bishops, stake leaders, and you know, it's policy is general, but I mean, I'd never even thought about that question. But I feel like that's where I would go to just make sure that, you know, you're in line, I guess. Good question though.
Another one from Zoom. How do we address a youth's desire to use different pronouns? The church's stance is to not use different pronouns, but a lot of therapists have said that we should. How can we balance that?
Yeah. So the question was, you know, how do we handle youth who want to use different pronouns and you know the church says not to use different pronouns. Actually, I would like to make a correction there. The church handbook says that we can use someone's preferred name and pronouns. So the handbook is clear on that. We can use their preferred name and pronouns. So if the youth asks for that and we do that, that is in line with current church policy. When the church started just a few years ago, when President Nelson said, you know, we're not the Mormon Church, we are not Mormons, we are the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and we are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. My parents are both converts, and so a lot of my relatives and my friends aren't members of the church, and some of them wouldn't say that we're Christian. And yeah, when I said I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, people honored that, and they said, well, even though I don't quite agree with what you're saying, if you don't want to be called Mormon, if you want to be called a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I'm going to honor that. And so I had a lot of friends honor this request to really go out of their way, instead of saying a 2-syllable phrase, to add a lot more syllables into how they described me. And they did that because they were kind, because that mattered to me. And we can be at least that kind to our transgender friends and loved ones who refer to them the way that feels appropriate to them.
We have a girl in our ward who wants to be called Cat.
So the question was, can we call a girl in the word a girl in the word cat? I know a lot of people named cats, so I don't say that'd be a problem. So.
No, like she wants to be a cat.
Oh, she wants to be a
She
cat.
wants to sit on the floor and act like a cat and be a cat during church lessons.
I would say with this, that sounds to me like it's outside of the scope of LGBTQ identities. So I wouldn't consider myself an expert on that.
Yeah, and I would say, honestly, I would say, let her say that she's a cat, and that's probably something she'll grow out of.
Yeah.
So yeah. So.
If I could, from my perspective, I've been a youth leader for a couple of different roles. And, as leaders, it's on us to help them have spiritual experiences with the Holy Spirit together, especially when they're together as youth. And I think, it's something that's, that we perceive as small and is something big that we, and I think it'll be okay.
Yeah.
So calling her cat is more loving than saying cat.
Yeah.
Love, share, and invite.
Yeah. So the comment was that we need to create spaces where people can feel the Spirit and experience, like have spiritual experiences. And I've been a therapist in the past, and I remember talking to a parent once who had a kid who was identifying as gay, and the parent said, "I think my kid's saying they're gay just for attention." And I said, "What I'm hearing you say is your kid doesn't get enough attention." and and so if someone is saying like, "I'm a cat," say, "Tell me what that means. Tell me what it's like to be a cat." Just get them talking, and then let them tell you about it, and then let them see that they can trust you, and just get them talking about their life. And as they continue growing, maturing, they're like things get figured out. And so I'd say the most important thing we can do is just create a space where kids feel heard, they feel loved, like this nice man said over here. Make sure that they are in places where they can feel the Spirit. Yeah, and we're definitely out of time. So
We started a little bit late. I think we have. Do you know what time we started? Quarter after. Someone say yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go 5 more minutes.
Okay.
Great.
Question, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
what about,
please.
people that aren't in our church that question you about why you stay in?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to them?
Yeah, so the question is people who aren't members of the church and they're asking questions about why you stay. And I'm guessing this has kind of an undertone of the question is like, how can you be an ally? How can you say that you're loving if you belong to this church that kind of has this reputation of being anti-LGBTQ? And I actually love that you asked that question because it's very common. And this is a really polarized space. Like religion and LGBTQ is polarized, and there's this extreme us versus them mentality. And I was asked that question a lot when I decided to go back to BYU for a master's. It's like, why would you're out, you say you're this ally, why would you go back to this place that has rules that don't align with like allyship, right? And I guess like for me, I honestly haven't thought of a perfect example of that. I know why I stay. I have a very strong testimony of the restoration of the gospel. I've given priesthood blessings and felt God's power through me. I know what I feel when I read the Book of Mormon and when I'm in the temple, and like these experiences I've had go beyond this this confusion of this us versus them. But also within this space, I try to do everything I can to break that assumption that members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints hate gay people and gay people hate members of the Church of Jesus Christ. And those are easy assumptions to live in, right? There are groups that agree with you and will say, yes, you're on our side, you're with us. But if you stop looking at sides and can just, be gracious, maybe thank them for their concern, and say, I love how much you care about people, and just kind of show your faith and your care too. That's kind of as far as I've got. Maybe you have a better way to say it.
Do you know the story? I'm going to share. I share all the time with this question.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So when I
should have let you just take this one.
when I lived in Tucson, I was there for 5 years. And I spent a year and a half living with 2 retired lesbians, and they were retired professionally, not from being lesbians. And they knew I was a member of the church when I moved in. And so one of my first nights in the house, the homeowner, she said, Ben, and she says this in a very polite way. She's like, how can you be part of this like homophobic, bigoted church, basically? And I told her about the Book of Mormon, how much it meant to me, and like what the church had done for me in my life. And she had read the Book of Mormon as a teen, like years before, and so she had some context for all this. And like she wasn't buying it. Like it wasn't answering her question. And I said this. I said, Allison, if you and Kathy ever want to come to church with me, there will always be room for you on the pew next to me. I'm going to make sure that my church and my congregation are the most welcoming place that they can be, and you will always be welcome there. And if someone gives you any guff, they're going to have to deal with me. And that meant something to her. She saw that I meant that I was going to make my congregation the best place it could be. And then they saw me do it. They saw me invite people over to the house to have these kinds of discussions. You know, they saw me writing blog posts and educating people, and they were so proud of me. And they were bigwigs in the Tucson LGBTQ scene, and they bragged about their gay Mormon roommate who was making his church a better place, like to all their LGBTQ friends. And so I didn't find they had any trouble or any problem with me being a member of the church because they saw that I really wanted to be a place where if they wanted to come, they would be welcome. And I meant it. And so if I had that same conversation again, and I said, I want my church to be welcoming and kind, they said, well, there's no way that can be possible. I would say, well, I'm going to do my best to make it possible. And I'm going to make sure that you know that I claim you, and however you want to be involved in my life, you can be involved in my life.
I have an older son who's left the church, and he has a friend who's a lesbian, and she and I have become friends. He doesn't talk to me so much anymore, but whenever he says something against the church, she says, no, you stop right now, because I know your parents, and I may not agree with everything in your church, but I know they're good people, and I know they raised you well, and you know, she stands up for me. So
Yeah.
I just was curious to how you address people that, you know, do you feel welcome? Do you always feel welcome? Probably not.
Do I always feel welcome?
Do you guys always feel welcome?
No,
Yeah.
of course not.
Yeah, so the comment in question were that you have a son who's left the church, and he has a friend who's a lesbian, and she defends the church to your son.
Because she knows me, and she knows how
Because she knows you.
She knows my family, and
That's really beautiful.
she's like, I'm never going to join your church, but I appreciate you.
I think that's awesome, and it sounds like she's seeing that. I know there are a lot of people, and there's even development theory that talks about this as when people come out, if they don't have the correct social support, and that's not just from a family, if it's coming from the like lack of support from the community or from friends, it can be like this really intense rejection of everything that reminds them of that period of their lives when they were really hurting. And there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of, but under all that like hatred, and it's just pain. Someone who's really been in pain, and that's really hard to work through. And anger is a secondary emotion because pain is so much harder to work through. And you know, this could be, granted, I don't know your son or his friend, but perhaps she can see a little more clearly because she doesn't have that same sense of pain connected to this thing. And I'm just really sorry. That's a really tough position to be in.
Yeah. And to go to your question, you know, do we always feel like we belong? Definitely not. You know, there are some really tough things that happen. I remember one general conference talk where the speaker said, you know, everything in the church is so that a man and his wife and children can be happy at home. Like, well, everything in the church is for that? Like, I'm not going to have that. And I remember another general conference speaker saying that everything we do in the church has eternal marriage as its focus. I'm like, well, what about me? You know? And then this gets me to a point where I'm like, well, if I'm not trying to be in an eternal marriage right now, like, does the church, do I fit there? And I've had to do a lot of wrestling. And as I've done that wrestling and wondering and pondering, I feel like, yes, 100% there's a place for me here, and 100% I want to be here, and this makes me a better person, helps me become like Jesus. But still, there are those moments that are really hard, and people say things that are really hard. But more often than not, I do feel like I do belong. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, just thank you so much for coming, guys, and we're gonna do the fireside in just a few minutes. So at 6:05. So take 7 minutes and take a quick
I'm gonna drink some water.
But just like thank you guys, and we'll share more soon.